Hi there. Today I want to do a video about the time that I got really sick when I was living in my car and kind of what I ended up doing about it. Now, I could definitely get into a whole bunch of different topics here regarding healthcare, health insurance, but the main thing I want to say is there was a time when it was in the winter and it was very cold, very rainy. So I think that kind of contributed to some of the symptoms I was having. What I was eventually diagnosed with was costochondritis. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that is, but I will explain a little bit more about what was going on with me. For instance, I've always had issues with chronic bronchitis ever since I was a little kid. It seems to come and go whenever it's wintertime and it's cold. Cold air gets to me. I've also been told that I have asthma, but I do not take a routine daily medication for asthma. It's more like it seems to flare up, and I do sometimes take medication for it if I have a flare-up, but I do not take a daily medication, which they say you're supposed to take to prevent flare-ups. But my flare-ups really only seem to be triggered when I'm around someone who is smoking, or if I am trying to do some sort of extreme exercise, usually referred to as exercise-induced asthma. Just, I have trouble breathing. But since I've had these long-term lung issues ever since I was young, I'm sure you could really care less about what my medical history is, but I'm only talking about how just being in a cold car where you don't have any way to really warm up, and then there's wetness and moisture in the air, I think it really kind of triggered some of my breathing problems that I was having at that time. So I truly believe that I had a more severe issue than what the doctor was telling me I had, because I feel like sometimes you go to the doctor and they just kind of blow you off. They don't really test you for anything. They just give you cough medicine and send you on your way. So I knew that I had bronchitis because I've had it before, and so I kind of was familiar with what the symptoms are. But I was also having a lot of chest pain. And obviously chest pain is something to be taken very seriously, because that could be a heart attack. But I knew my chest pain was probably more lung related, and so I kind of asked, would they be giving me some sort of x-ray to x-ray my lungs? I had been in the hospital before for issues with my lungs, and so I just assumed that's what they would do, and they did not. They just made it sound like, unless you were coughing up blood, that you're fine. I mean, that's kind of how they made it sound. And even though, yes, technically I was coughing up phlegm that had, tinges of blood in it, I mean, that seems pretty serious, but I felt like the doctor just wasn't taking me serious. And then also the doctor told me there was no way I could be having the symptoms or the amount of pain that I was describing unless I had been in a car accident or if I had fallen off a building. And so clearly I had not been in a car accident or fallen off a building. So I had explained that I've been really sick with the bronchitis. I'd been coughing really hard. And there was a time where I had coughed so hard that I felt like something rip. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but like rip, like on my side by my rib cage. And that's when I started feeling that pain. And it's like, he didn't believe what I was saying. So, and I had seen online that sometimes you can cough so hard you break a rib, which is crazy. But I mean, that's why I don't know if that's what happened to me. And as far as getting a second opinion, let's talk about healthcare, that sometimes you can't always afford to just be going to doctor after doctor until someone finally diagnoses what you really have. So they told me I had this costochondritis, and long story short, I will just explain it as if I felt like I had broken ribs. And that's why I thought I needed to have some sort of x-ray to determine if that's what was going on. And they basically said that, even if you had a broken rib, there's nothing we can do. It's not like you can put a cast on someone to make their ribs heal, that it just over time will heal anyways. So that's why they said that having an x-ray would be irrelevant, because if it was broken or not broken, the treatment was still the same. Okay, so I know that all sounds silly, but let's talk about what it was like living in a car at that time. Because one of the troubles I was having was that it was very hard to move. I had very poor, limited range of motion. I was in a lot of pain. And so to just try to move around inside the car, the vehicle that I'm in, it's a very small car. But what I was finding that when I first started having this chest pain, you know, the first thing I did was I called for a doctor's office to ask if I should come in, if I should go to the emergency room, if I should make an appointment to see the doctor. You know, this is where, you know, right from the beginning, I started getting the runaround about how it's not really an emergency. You don't really need to come in. And the pain just started getting worse and worse. And so that's when I thought, you know, there's something really wrong here. Okay. And, you know, I'm not someone who's just like making up pain to go get pain medication. I don't want pain medication. I want them to find out what's wrong with me, because if there's something seriously wrong, then we need to fix what that problem is. So anyways, I ended up having this extreme pain, and it got to the point where, you know, me just trying to drive to the doctor, I couldn't even turn the steering wheel of my car because it hurt so much just in my general chest and rib area. And so I knew something was definitely wrong. So if you ever look up a little bit about what costochondritis involves, it's kind of like a swelling of your rib area. So that is what's around your lungs, but also it can just generally hurt to move about. So what I ended up doing was, for at least a week, I got a hotel room, and I knew it was going to be expensive to do that, but I felt like I needed that time to just recover because I was in bad shape. I mean, I had the bronchitis already. I was coughing up all this phlegm. I was sick. Plus, it was just so cold. It was so cold and rainy. So it was nice to stay in a hotel room where it was warm. I could turn on the heat. I could get under the blankets. I could just rest and try to recover. But I could definitely go into more detail about what went on with me with having that diagnosis, and why I say I believe it was probably a lot more serious than what the doctor said. But when I go to the doctor, they just, like I said, they just kind of blow you off. They don't do any tests. They didn't do any x-rays. And, you know, it's kind of like, well, you know, I know that I'm not making this up, and I know that I'm not crazy, but if the whole medical system is set up to kind of sway you from even trying to get help, I mean, whatever. So this is where I just felt like I need to take care of myself. And I know part of the whole reason of living in a car is to financially save money. You don't want to be wasting time on hotel rooms or wasting money on hotel rooms. And so it was just really something that I had to do to take care of me and to try to get better. It took a long time to what I would consider get better, because I got over the bronchitis, but I still had this ongoing chest pain. And when I say chest pain, I don't mean kind of like up here in your heart, but it was definitely more like rib pain, or pain all along from the front to the sides of where I was feeling the pain. And it was always on the left-hand side. So some of the symptoms I was having, I mean, I don't mind describing it, but just having severe pain. The pain where it felt like a very sharp pain, that would just continue. It would come on all of a sudden and then just continue. It was prolonged. I had the bronchitis at the same time, so of course I was coughing up all this phlegm and whatnot. But then of course not having that range of motion, not being able to like do this with, you know, the steering wheel to drive somewhere. When you're in a car like this, you're trying to sleep in a car this small, there's a lot of like crawling around I had to do, climbing over the seats, you know, crouching down, you know. So there's not much motion to move about when you're in a tiny car like this. And it was virtually impossible for me to even move. There were times when I would lay down and I could barely get myself back up. Now, when I was staying in the hotel room, if I was laying down on a hotel bed, I would have to just like roll myself off the bed, because I couldn't just lift myself up with my own, you know, stomach muscles or ribs or whatever, you know, you want to call it, to just lift yourself up from a laying down to sitting position. I had to like roll my whole body off the side of the bed and then hope that I would like land on my feet. I mean, so all of that probably sounds totally crazy. So this is where I will talk about the medical part of it and the medical insurance part of it. Now, part of my backstory, if you followed me before, is that I had moved from Arizona to Washington. And so when you're in Washington, you can get medical insurance through the state. They didn't have that in Arizona, so that was all brand new to me. So when I moved to Washington, one of the first things I did was apply for medical insurance. you apply through the state, and it's kind of like based on your income, and then they give you a list of different insurances to choose from, and you can choose what's most affordable. If you're low income, of course, you would get free insurance, but if you make past a certain amount, then they offer you like a low cost option. Now, when I got the insurance, one of the first things I did was they send you a thing in the mail basically saying like, this is your assigned clinic. You don't really have a set doctor, but they say like, this is your clinic, so you have to call them to make an appointment or to see a doctor, which I did. So after getting approved for the insurance, and they sent me the stuff in the mail, and then they said like, this is your assigned clinic. So then I called there and I said I wanted to make an appointment, that I'd be a brand new patient, and they said, well, we're not accepting new patients. And it's like, okay, well, I was assigned here, so what am I supposed to do? Like, if I'm sick, who do I go to? Oh, you need to call your insurance and have them assign you to someone else. Okay, well, that was like a whole new process where I had to call them and say, basically, the doctor you assigned me refuses to see me, refuses to take new patients. So that was a whole procedure where they basically said like, well, I'm sorry, that's the only one in your area. It's like, well, then what am I supposed to do if I get sick? And then they said, well, if you ever get sick, you can just go to a hospital, go to urgent care. It's like, well, so I can't really like go to a doctor and have them, run like, the blood tests on you to see like what's going on with you, what's going on with your health, whatever your annual checkup is you're supposed to do. I'm female, so isn't there like a female checkup I need to be having? And they really like didn't seem too concerned. If you get sick, just go to urgent care. So, of course, at that time, I'm a healthy person, somewhat, and so, I didn't worry about it. And then there was a time where basically I went to urgent care, because I was having some issues. I probably had a cold or something like that. I don't know if it was anything that I needed to take medication for, but also I was thinking like, had a fever, I had a runny nose, that sort of thing. So we went to urgent care, and, whatever, they sent me on my way. Well, so now here we are going down the road where it's like, I've still never actually seen a doctor or had any tests done on me or anything. And it was just very frustrating, because I felt like, here's this insurance being provided to me, but I really don't get to use it or any of the benefits of it, it seems. So that's part of my complaint about the whole, I guess, insurance system. But then, of course, when I tell you about this whole other issue I had with the bronchitis and all of that, to have them basically refuse to give me an x-ray, say it wasn't necessary, kind of blew off some of my symptoms, just told me that I have this costochondritis, even though I was like in absolute pain. I could barely move. I couldn't, drive a car. It's like, okay, well, I guess I'm just supposed to be sent on my way and eventually I'll get better. I guess that's how it works. I mean, everyone who's been sick eventually gets better eventually, right? But I would say that even though this happened several years ago, I still have rib pain. I still have a pain in the side, my left-hand side. It's a pain that has never gone away ever since this first flare-up. If it was supposedly a broken rib, I don't know if broken rib pain eventually goes away, but I was also told, that there's nothing they could do for a broken rib anyways, that eventually stuff like that just heals on its own. It's like, okay, well, I've always had this pain in my side, and it's not like that sharp stabbing pain like in the beginning, but it's still a pain that, like, sometimes if I just twist my body a certain way, I feel that pain. And it's like, there's times when I can't sleep well at night because of it. So I really don't know what to make of it. I don't know if anyone has the same diagnosis I've had. And I'm making this video really just to talk about a little bit about my experience with healthcare in Washington, healthcare and insurance, and some of the pitfalls of living in a car, and how maybe being in a car and in really cold conditions and wet, rainy conditions can really flare up some lung and breathing issues. And sometimes it can be scary because if you are having any sort of severe chest pain, I mean, you don't know. You don't know if it's a heart attack. You don't know, like, you know you're supposed to take it serious and go to the hospital, but you also don't want to, like, waste your time going to the hospital, wasting the doctor's time, wasting money for bills that you're going to have to pay when it turns out you didn't have anything wrong in the first place. So I really don't know. I'm not a doctor, but all I can say is this is my experience. Hope you enjoyed my story.